Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Greg Olson. I'm the director of the New York State Office for Aging. I'm really excited to be joined today by Dina Press, Doris Green, and Sharon Cackett, and I will introduce them a little bit more formally in a minute. The purpose of the Facebook Lives that we've been doing now for 2 years is pretty straightforward. I try to bring really important information to the general public that they may not be aware of, but more importantly, to connect with some resources and some assistance if people need them that they may not be aware of. And I think that the topics that we've picked over the last 2 years have all been very important. But we come back to today's topic, and we've done on multiple occasions and need to do exactly that because it's such an important topic. We're here today to talk about individuals who do not get paid that assist older adults, children, individuals with disabilities that may need some help day to day to maintain their independence or help them with other activities so that they, again, can maintain their independence in their homes and communities. These individuals are absolutely paramount to the healthcare system and following up on a healthcare incident or episode or appointments, et cetera. This is the backbone of our nation's long-term care system, providing the bulk of long-term care in the home and community, and certainly social services as well, and need to be recognized and supported whenever possible. Sometimes individuals don't have any problem providing some of these tasks or potential services, but oftentimes as needs change or there's an episode like a stroke or a major fall or a cognitive impairment, those tasks can start to build and become very difficult for individuals to continue to provide, and may not, feel like they're part of something or may feel like they're alone. Often these people don't self-identify. They're just sons and daughters and neighbors and grandkids and, that are providing that support. They may not know that there's assistance out there, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit more today, or they're reluctant to ask for help. And that's a cultural thing that we have to understand as a root cause. It's not easy for people to ask for help. It's often seen as a sign of weakness rather than what it truly is, which is a sign of strength. So let me introduce my three guests today, and then we'll dive right in. We have first Dina Press, who's an aging service program analyst at the New York State Office for the Aging. She brings 22 years of experience in human services, garnered in various state and local organizations. Throughout her career in government service, she has supported and advocated for our community's most vulnerable and underrepresented populations. From being a state program administrator, a program coordinator directly working with informal caregivers, she has helped to achieve many positive outcomes for families across New York State. In her current role, she leads many initiatives focused on caregiving and respite, including developing systemic changes through programs and policies designed to provide increased access to caregiver service and strengthen impacted groups and targeted populations. So Dina, welcome. Next, we have Doris Green, who has worked in aging and disability field for more than 20 years and is from Rochester, New York. Her professional experience includes developing programs in the areas of planning, advocacy, and financial services for older adults and caregivers of persons with disabilities. She currently serves as the director of the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition as an employee of Lifespan of Greater Rochester. In this role, Doris oversees a coalition of informal caregivers and agencies that support caregivers throughout New York State. Doris holds an MPA from my alma mater, SUNY Brockport. Welcome, Doris. And finally, Sharon, who is a very strong advocate for caregivers, first serving as an EAP coordinator and later as a volunteer for the Comfort House of Allegheny County. There, she helped foster an environment of emotional and psychological safety for those at the end of life and their caregivers. Working in an area agency on aging, she provided case management, led support groups, and provided family and care consultations for caregivers. At the New York State Caregiver and Respite Coalition, where she's currently employed, she's helping to address growing need for more and expanded volunteer respite opportunities. She understands the needs of the community, the apprehension of volunteers, and the realities of continued support. Sharon holds a master's degree in higher education and policy studies from SUNY Albany. So welcome to you as well, Sharon. So let's start at 30,000 feet. The language I use to open up is not the language any three of you have in your bios, right? We talk about the industry term that we use, which is caregiving, but the general public does not recognize that term. So I wanted to start with, a basic question to you, Dina. What is a caregiver?
Thanks, Greg. And I think, you spelled it out nicely in that that's one of the biggest challenges we have is that people don't self-identify because that term may not have meaning for them. These are individuals who are just caring for somebody that they love, and they want to make sure that they have the needs met in order to be able to stay in the community where they have a good quality of life. But when you're thinking about a formal definition of a caregiver, this is someone who is an unpaid family member, a foster parent, or maybe another unpaid adult who's providing in-home monitoring, management, supervision, or treatment of a child or an adult with a special need.
Right. And so, caregivers can be anybody, any age. We know that they can be friends, they can be neighbors, for a spouse, for a sister, for a brother, for a step, for an aunt or an uncle. We know that the term caregiver includes, people that are providing service to older adults, but we're seeing a real shift in who caregivers are. It was traditionally, an older woman in her 60s caring for an adult parent. We know that that's not, of course, that's a huge block, but we know men are taking on much larger roles. We know millennials, Generation Xers, we have over 300,000 grandparents taking care of grandkids. So what kind of tasks, for those out there who are like, I'm not a caregiver, I'm the son of my father and I'm doing X, Y, Z, what are the kinds of tasks that we would include so that folks out there who never thought about it this way would say, oh my God, that's me?
These could be people that are driving someone to medical appointments, helping run errands, doing laundry, helping with meal prep, maybe mowing the lawn or helping with snow removal. Of course, in addition to things that are maybe more hands-on, where they're having to assist them with bathing or getting dressed, mobility. So those are the type of things that would classify as a caregiver.
There's a lot of people out there that are probably like, I had no idea that I was. Now, at the State Office for Aging, as I read, and of course, I've known you for years, you oversee kind of our caregiver portfolio. And, what I always like to talk about is there are direct services for caregivers and there are indirect services. And that's what our office does globally, right? There's things that you do to support caregivers themselves and providing, respite or access to other things that can help them do their jobs. But our office provides services directly to older adults, which then benefit the caregiver themselves. So tell us briefly what you do for the office and how you support the network's caregivers and caregiver programs.
Sure. So I do, as you just said, Greg, I oversee several caregiver support programs for New York State. And these include, we have 17 caregiver resource centers that are state funded and they're in distinct counties. We have a federally funded National Family Caregiver Support Program that are providing direct services to caregivers with things such as you mentioned, respite and training and support groups, counseling. And then there's a lifespan respite program, which we're going to talk more about when Doris and Sharon, speak on some of the services that are coming out of the coalition. But that's a federally funded program that I oversee. Those funds do support the coalition's work. But with all of these program areas, what I provide is ongoing technical assistance, training, and guidance to our whole network of providers so that they can better support caregivers who are, trying to support their loved ones. But as you mentioned, we know caregivers, sometimes they take on this role where it may be something that they want to do to keep their loved one off of formal services for as long as possible. But it could also be that in order to access formal services, there might be a waiting period. And so now they are having to jump in and kind of fill that gap until the access can be successful in long-term services. So they still have other things to juggle, right? They're working, they might have young children, and now all of a sudden they're thrown into this role and oftentimes without notice, and they're trying to figure out, gosh, what can I do? So in addition to the supports that we offer through some of these very specific programs that are meant for them in their caregiving role, there are also many programs that we offer our older adults that, there's expanded in-home services for the elderly program that could provide, ongoing long-term services if eligible. and allow this individual to stay in the community longer. There's home delivered meals. We have a whole package of services that, depending upon the needs and preferences of the family and what their aim is, of whether they're trying to keep that informal caregiver supported so they can continue to do the things that they're doing in their role, or they're looking to eventually have the individual, the older adult, access something that could be more long-term. So we have a lot of options, and we'll get into, how you can access some of these.
Yeah, and I'm excited for that because, again, information's only as good if you can connect with supports. And again, look, not everybody needs help or wants help, but a lot of people don't know that there is help when those tasks get difficult. And I think some of the data, this is an area we've all been working in for years and years, but it's really gotten a lot of attention during COVID when we see some of the data, the suicide rates or the contemplation of suicide, COVID-induced trauma, using alcohol and drugs to cope. If you are, somebody my age with kids at home during the pandemic and taking care of an older adult, what some of that data is. And I think it's really helpful to put data behind some of the work that we're doing. And so I'm looking forward to you, showing us and showing everybody how we can access supports. But let me move over to Doris and Sharon. You guys represent the New York State Caregiver and Respite Coalition. So briefly talk about why you exist and what it is you do.
Well, the coalition exists as part of the Lifespan Respite Program, which is a partnership of NYSOFA and Lifespan and MACOFA. And we exist really with you guys to help to expand respite across the state. And the coalition really focuses on volunteer respite opportunities. So we do a lot of training and we provide some financial supports for organizations and faith communities that want to expand and start respite programs.
Yep, and what probably most people don't know is you guys have been around a while and have built a real great, obviously a great partnership with us, but a great network of individuals and organizations that are interested in this work. So you have a website. You've spent a lot of time, Doris, really building resources and tools and other types of things that can really benefit people. Can you give out that website, and we'll make sure that Kelly sticks it into the chat so that people can really access the tools and resources and supports that you put together.
Sure, it's nyscrc right behind me.org. And there's really resources for professionals, for businesses, for kinship caregivers, for caregivers of people with long-term chronic disabilities. It's very rich and robust, and it also has all the events and trainings that we have out there, and of course the voucher program, which I'm going to talk about.
Okay, and we're going to be shifting gears back and forth. So, Dina, let me go back to you. I think a lot of people, regardless of whether you're a caregiver or you're doing something else, often feel like they're the only ones, they're alone. How many caregivers roughly do we have in any given year in New York State?
It's crazy, but every year we have about 4.1 million New Yorkers that assume the role of caregiver at some point. And they're providing more than 2.6 billion hours of direct hands-on care to loved ones.
Right, and I talked about how critical that is. Imagine being discharged from a hospital and having to get to a follow-up appointment, or your, medication reconciliation, or again, the shopping assistance or bill paying, or actually direct hands-on care, transportation. And you talked about juggling, and I'm really glad you used that word, because issues that arise don't happen between, the hours of 9 and noon or 9 and 5. It could be 24/7. And, we've spent a lot of time trying to not only address non-working caregivers, but all working caregivers, because I think many of us that work are dealing with this as well, given the number of 4.1 million. So can you show us if somebody's out there and is like, I'm doing okay for now, or somebody's out there thinking I'm starting to get overwhelmed, but I'm really not sure what's out there, what's available, or how to access it. Show them how to do that.
Sure. So we have New York Connects, which is our No Wrong Door here in New York State. And essentially this program exists so to help anyone who's in need of long-term services, including caregivers who might need services for a loved one or services for themselves. An easy way to go about searching for this, either on their own or by calling our New York Connects program directly. They can be reached by phone. They can be reached in person. Every single office for aging locally does have a New York Connects program where if you wanted to go in person and did not want to call, you could do that. And then we do have a very robust online directory that I am going to just do, bear with me because I got to share my screen, but I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough so that you can see exactly how you can go about searching for any service really that you need. But I'm going to use the example today of respite because we are talking about caregivers, and respite tends to be the most popular service that caregivers like to access. So here you can see that there are 3 different ways to search in the directory. And basically, if you are unsure what you're looking for, there's an ability to do a self-guided search. If you have a keyword, you can plug that in. So we did that for this purpose of putting in respite. Or you can also explore by just categories in that last option all the way to the right. But if you search for respite, and we used Albany County as the example, you'll see here where it will result in 62 results. And then if you go a step further after selecting that, then you'll see here how the results page appears, and you can actually see that this in-home respite care of who the provider is, the provider address, the telephone number. And the nice thing about this is that with these listings, you can print out. So if you have and you want to narrow it down to 4 or 5 listings, you can print that out. If you're helping somebody else and you want to share these resources, you can email them, and you can also, through the directory, you can actually indicate if you want a New York Connects INA specialist, an information and assistance specialist to contact you. So that is our New York Connects resource directory. If you have not checked it out or you don't know anything about New York Connects, I really recommend that you go and explore it. There's a lot of resources on there. I think we're at over 172,000 listings now. So encourage you to do so.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And there's been a lot of work, not only within our office, but with our partners at the state level to really redesign it and make it very easy to search, like you just said. Again, I hear us using terms, industry terms that the general public doesn't know. Sharon, what's respite?
So respite is actually a short-term episodic break for a caregiver. It's not designed to be the long-term care strategy for someone who's taking care of another person. It's really designed to address the needs of that caregiver so they can sustain the long-term care they're providing to their loved one. So it's a return to hobbies, it's a return to going out with friends, maybe even just going upstairs and taking a nap, but it's something that rejuvenates them, restores them so that they can continue on with the care.
Right. So it's a trust issue, is it not? So you mentioned a couple real key things that, I think, we talk about, but how somebody can become isolated if they're a full-time caregiver for somebody that loses their support systems, loses their friends because of that, and just how important it is to, even as you said, take a nap, or be able to go out and get your hair done, or go over to a friend's. Talk a little bit about what you see of caregivers that have kind of reached that point where this type of service would be so important to their overall well-being and the care that they provide.
Absolutely. And I think that you alluded to it before, when people seek out help when things become too difficult, and that's often too late, right? So the isolation, and particularly with COVID, was monumental. Caregivers and care receivers both got sick of one another because they didn't see anyone else, right? So bringing in different services and supports when it's not the crisis moment is really important. Finding those services in the community and helping people try out respite, try it out so that they're not waiting until it's a hospital discharge and then trying to find somebody that's a good fit, because really that adds to the frustration and to the difficulty of that whole process.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things that you guys are, well, the three of you are working on, but specifically, Doris and Sharon, we're going to really dive into respite. I think, Dina provided a real good overview of not only respite, but the various other types of caregiver supports that are available, both direct and indirect. We have been working, and boy, do we rely on volunteers in so many different areas, whether that be food production, home delivered meal, transportation, health counseling, eyes and ears in nursing homes. We're really fortunate in New York. We've got, almost 1 million volunteers who are over the age of 55 that are, putting in 500 million hours of service every single year at an economic value of 13.8 billion. But you guys have been working to try to increase and expand respite through a volunteer respite model. Explain a little bit about that.
So we do it in a couple of ways. One is the mini grants that I mentioned, financial support for agencies or faith communities that want to serve people right in their communities. And in that model, we use a program called REST. Sharon, do you want to talk a little bit about REST?
Sure. So REST is an evidence-based training program for volunteers who want to provide respite to either individuals in the home or join a day program that's been set up where they can volunteer with other volunteers to establish that social interaction component. So it really involves the core competencies of ARCH, which we can talk about in a little bit, what respite providers really need to know in order to successfully fill that role. So you need to think about, what does that person need from me during that time? How do I respect the boundaries of the family when they're in respite? So it really covers a whole number of topics for that person or that group to either work well together providing that service or to feel very confident going into a home and providing it one-on-one.
So what we know about New York is New Yorkers give back to New Yorkers, right? So I'm assuming, like the rest of our network, you guys could always use an increase in your volunteer corps. So if people are listening live now, or they will be in the next couple of weeks, how would they volunteer to do what you just talked about?
So they can reach out to the coalition. There's a number of ways they can get involved with the coalition. Providing direct respite and volunteering that way is certainly one. But being an advocate for caregivers through our voice and joining our cause is another way they certainly can be involved. So if someone's interested in starting a respite, becoming a respite provider, any of those sorts of passions that they bring to the table, we can certainly connect them to the best opportunities in their community.
That's great. So hopefully we'll put that info in the chat for anybody that's interested in, possibly becoming a volunteer to provide this critical service. And you guys are also working on a voucher program. I have no idea what that means. Tell me what that means.
Well, it's really exciting. And we did a lot of work with the state office to really explore this in depth. The coalition is a member of a great network across the country. And we found that there were a lot of other states who were doing voucher programs. And a voucher program gives, I call it a coupon so people understand. We can provide a caregiver up to $600 to pay for a respite provider for their loved one. And it's a caregiver directed model, which means the caregiver gets to choose, right? It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be an organization. And it's up to them how much they pay, who they hire, when and how the respite is delivered. So it really is in the hands of the caregiver, and it's very exciting. We also have an opportunity if there's an emergency for a caregiver. There's very few opportunities if a caregiver has an emergency, but we can offer a voucher that could be paid back to the caregiver if they faced an emergency that they had to leave and have someone stay with their loved one.
I think that's really exciting. You said a couple key things. Caregiver directed. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It's very person-centered. It's a different way of doing things. And certainly it's newer in the caregiver realm, but really what it is trusting people who we would traditionally serve through a normal model to empower themselves to make their own decisions of when, what, where, when, and how, ways to support them. So if somebody was interested in your voucher program, I know that it's not statewide, but if they are interested in potentially capitalizing on this new project program, how would they do that?
Well, first of all, Greg, it is statewide. So just to want to say that out there, how would they do it? They would go to our website, which is in the chat, I believe, at this point. They can reach out to us directly. There's an email in there. We can send them an application packet. They can go on the website and download the forms that they need. You know, I just want to say, I had a caregiver tell me, and I think this is very common, that, you know, I'm always asking people to help me and I feel bad. And now I can offer to pay them and it makes me feel better and it offers them some monetary incentive to help. So I think it makes the caregivers feel like they're not always just asking and asking and asking if they can offer some payment.
Well, and that does matter. I know through our home delivered meal program, we don't charge for that. We do ask for voluntary donations, and exactly to your point, we generate 30 million additional dollars through $1, $2, $3 donations because people want to feel like they're not taking, they're contributing, they're giving. So it's that fits in. And I apologize about the misstatement on the statewide nature. So before I move back to Dina and then dive over to Sharon quickly, you mentioned the term application, and that scares everybody, right? So tell me, is this a lengthy application? What are the types of things that people could feel comfortable going, that it's not going to be a 35-page, Medicaid application, for example?
It's not. We've kept it as simple as possible. It really asks a little bit of demographic data. Down the line, you have to identify who the care respite providers are that you're using so that we have an opportunity to pay them. But the other point I wanted to make is that this really does also target kinship caregivers. And we have 193,000 kinship caregivers right in New York State, right? And most of them are grandparents and older adults raising children due to all sorts of circumstances. So I just want to make sure I get in there that those, it's not just for older adults, but it is for kinship caregivers as well. We can walk you through that application. Most people are connected to some kind of care management, so they could turn to those people to help them with the application, but we stand ready and willing to help them through it. It's not all that complicated.
No, and I appreciate that, and just make folks a little more at ease in terms of going through the process. So we'll make sure that we, again, go to NYSERC's website and you can view that. Dina, Doris talked about data. I will admit to the audience, as I do every time, I'm a data geek. Data allows you to tell a very, very different story than what an anecdote would be, and both of them are important, but data really matters. Our office has been working on a multi-level public-private partnership, which is inclusive of NYSERC and many, many other organizations, to do exactly that, to collect data on caregivers, whether they're working or not working. Can you explain a little bit about this, and just mention the survey instruments that we will put into the chat, because we'd really like to continue to push some of these resources out.
Yeah, so New York right now has 2 surveys that we're kind of asking for your help so that we can collect this data. One is targeted to employed caregivers, and it's anonymous. There's no cost. It's web-based, and the purpose that we're conducting these is, as Greg said, the data helps to tell the story. We can, with the employed caregiver survey, it can really help also the HR departments, the employers really understand the impact of caregiving on the people that are working for them, and be able to get them linked to resources. So they're not seeing segments like this on Facebook Live, right? It's a trusted source. They go to their employer. I'm struggling. I have this going on at home. I have this going on at work. I need some relief. Do you have anything you can provide me? It also will give us as a state a better understanding from the perspective of the caregiver, right? So that we can then think about, from a systems issue standpoint, what we can help do to address their needs. So we have 2 survey links. One, if you're any caregiver, for looking at an intensity index, and this is Archangels. So we really encourage you to take this. This will allow you just to take a minute of time to check in with yourself so that you can kind of like figure out your intensity score at that moment. It could change, you know, next week you take it again and you might be in a very different place, but it'll give you that indicator of, okay, am I in the red? Am I in the yellow? Am I in the green? And then at the very end, it will allow you to select if you choose to, so it's optional, to get connected to some help. So any caregiver, we encourage you to take that. I believe we're going to drop that link into the chat so you can access the Archangels intensity index survey. And then if you're a working caregiver, we ask that you consider completing this short survey, which will, you know, help again understand the scope and the needs of those that are working and have a caregiving role. And that data will also, like I said, inform those employers so that they can really create a better environment, a more supportive workplace environment, and make sure that it's a healthy environment for you. So we'll share that link as well and encourage you to take either or both. So
yeah, and I appreciate you raising that because you know, we had seen data years ago from MetLife Mature Market that the impact of caregiving on loss of productivity in businesses exceeded $60 billion. And that was about 16 years ago. And I think in order, just as an advocate and as a community organizer, the broader we can develop the coalition that is interested in supporting the people that do this work. We can't do it without businesses because we know that whether it's the State Office for the Aging or NYSERC or Lifespan of Greater Rochester, you could easily have 20 to 60% of your workforce that are actively caregiving. That means that they could be coming in late, leaving early, making phone calls during the day, could be up all night with somebody who, you know, is in pain or doesn't sleep or has a cognitive impairment. Then you show up the next day and you're not very productive, and turnover rates, not taking promotions, which affect your long-term economic future. There's so many things. And that's what this data is designed to do. And we've also created with our partners at the Department of Labor, a caregiver guide for businesses. It's good business for businesses to recognize this is happening right under their noses. I mean that in a positive way, can help the over 52% of people who don't identify just through regular relationships. And then, as you said, if they need assistance to be able to connect them to resources out there like New York Connects that can help support them in their jobs and in the roles that they play. So we will put all 3 of those links in there. The data is something that we really need to be able to, again, broaden the story and get, you know, both the public support and the private sector support, given that the majority of businesses in New York State are small, and we employ a lot of people that could be helpful in this effort. So Sharon, let me switch over to you. Mm-hmm. You have an online respite care provider certificate program. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're excited about this. You know, I think that I spoke earlier about the REST program, which is a very interactive in-person program, which was very successful until COVID hit, and then in-person interactive just kind of went out the window. It was part of our work plan all along to come up with an online respite provider training. And working with Arch and Nashby, we joined in a pilot program to launch and test this online respite provider curriculum certificate program, and also develop a registry for people who complete the certificate to be able to provide respite in their community. So it's a free program. It doesn't cost the learner anything. It fits hand in hand with the voucher program. So if someone who's never had respite before says, well, maybe I'll try it, there's nothing to lose. There's $600 available to me to hire Mrs. Jones down the street. And hey, maybe Mrs. Jones can take the curriculum and we can be on the same page with my expectations and disease-specific information, things like that. So we're pretty excited about it. We've launched it in March, and it's accessible to anyone through our website.
I think that's really exciting. So who are your primary, or maybe that's not the right question, what's the universe of individuals and or organizations that you think would really benefit from from this certificate program?
Yeah, so there's a couple of places. One is certainly volunteers, right? So if they're a neighbor and they're just giving freely of their time, but they want to be a little bit more confident or have a little bit more competency in that, they certainly can sit through the course and feel a little bit better prepared. We have a number of college students who are participating in the coursework right now. They may be in social work, they may be in the nursing field, but they may just want that to bolster that concept of respite that always doesn't get defined in the curriculum in the schools, right? We also have a number of folks who are providing consumer-directed care through other programs than the voucher program. So their training is really up to the caregiver and the consumer-directed support professional. This just gives them a little bit more of a resource for that. And then it allows them to market themselves as a respite provider. You know, it's mostly social companionship. It's not a medical model kind of care for respite. It's really giving that caregiver a break. But once they put their names out there, they can really possibly become a pathway to employment for them, rather than just a volunteer job that they really loved with their heart and soul. So we're looking at a lot of different aspects for that to really benefit the people who are taking the course.
I think that's great. You mentioned it's free. It's on your website. Two other things though, if somebody may be interested in this, I kind of get the general idea, but what are the topics that you talked about, the confidence building, right? Because it's a lot of different types of people you could be providing this care for. So what are the types of topics? And if somebody was interested, how long is the course?
Right. So two questions. Make sure I circle back to the second question. Last year before, ARCH, which is the National Respite Network, put together a work group to look at what are the universal core competencies needed for someone to provide respite. And so they put a lot of time into really aggregating all the trainings that were out there and all of the competencies that were in different programs, and settled on those core competencies of what is respite? How do I provide person-centered care? How do I respect, as you said, the cultural differences? You talked about a cultural dilemma of even asking for help. But in other cultures, caregivers, the word doesn't mean anything. There's other words that are replacing that. So how do you really understand all those nuances? We also will talk about how to market yourself as a respite provider. What are the professional things that you need to consider? How to handle an emergency. So it really covers a lot of information, a lot of territory, and it is customized to New York State for our program. So a lot of the resources and the services and agencies are right there for not only the respite provider to understand, but also share with the caregiver they're supporting.
And how long does it take to get through the class?
I knew I would forget. It averages about 6 to 7 hours all together for the 10 courses, but it's self-paced. So you can log in and you can do a half hour here, half hour there, whatever you choose to do. And again, we keep tags on people who are in the program. We continue to reach out to them. I see you're halfway through and maybe you've stalled for a little bit. Is it something with the program? Can we help you? Can we connect you to another resource? So we really desire it to be something that's more interactive from us to the respite providers to help them succeed, to help them get the next step if they're looking for a CNA or an HHA or LPN. So it can really be a building block to their pathway to employment as well.
Well, I think this is great. We just launched a newsletter after many, many years. So we'll make sure that both of these options are contained in the next issue. So we talked about, again, the organization. So you've got the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition. You've got those links. We have an opportunity for the voucher program expansion for those that might be interested, and the application is there. We have this new certificate program that you can also find there, but I want you guys to check out NYSERC's website. There's so much more on there. Dina had talked about the Caregiver Guide to Businesses, where if anybody's out there that's in a business, is working for anybody, make sure you get that to your HR department. She talked about the New York Connects resource directory and how simple it is to utilize, but there are over 100,000 local respite and caregiving support pieces in there, depending on where you live, as well as the 2 surveys. So I appreciate you guys walking through that. Kelly, I believe we have a couple of questions. If you want to open your mic up.
We do, Greg. The first question that we had is from Sharon, who has a friend whose wife's dementia is getting worse. She is functioning but needs supervision. She also suffers from severe anxiety, and she's been to the emergency room twice this year. She would love to direct him to some help. What is your advice?
I'll speak, I guess, on behalf of us. I would direct them to call our 1-800 number for New York Connects, and they can get a live representative on the phone that's locally based in where they live, and they will be able to, provide information and take some information so that they can get them connected to the best resources to help this individual.
Yeah, I would also remind folks, we have a very strong partnership and network with the Alzheimer's Association chapters. So not only is there an opportunity to, this might not be, again, I don't know the exact question or the circumstances. There's 71 health conditions that mimic dementia and cognitive impairment. And so there's resources through the Centers of Excellence and the Alzheimer's Association chapters as well. But to Dina's point, there's so many things to remember that's out there. You don't have to remember all the programs and services. You just have to remember where to start. And that's at your Office for Aging. In this particular case, in addition to that, it might be the Alzheimer's Association chapter. Was there another one, Kelly?
Nope, that was it for now. Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. A follow-up question was, when you fill out the caregiving survey, are your results being sent to your employer?
They are not. The individual who is filling it out has an option to put in their employer's name or not. And the reason that we did it that way is we recognize that 90% of the state's business is small business. Larger ones are only 10%. So we have worked with some very, very large companies with 6,000 plus employees. But when you do that, you can't identify who the employee is. So you would just leave that blank. But we would really appreciate if you filled that out. I mean, the data that's coming out of it is not something we didn't anticipate. But as you can imagine, as the workforce is a different age demographic than the folks we traditionally serve, which are spouses or adult children. And so to see the number of millennials and Generation Xers and grandkids taking care of grandparents, and as Doris had mentioned, on the flip side, how many grandparents and kin care families are taking care of grandkids. So the long story is, no, you do not have to put your company name in there. We're not sharing any company specific data. We have helped companies, though, mimic our survey that would go directly to them so that they could have the data in aggregate so that they could, again, help with the goals of what we talked about. All right, I'm going to give you an open-ended question. Anything that I didn't ask you, anything burning in your mind that you either want to raise or reiterate? Start with you,
Yeah,
Dina.
we do.
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Doris. You're on a roll. Go
Well,
for it.
we're hosting a conference on August 9th and 10th in Rochester, specifically targeted for businesses, HR professionals, to really take a deep dive into this issue around caregivers in the workplace and what they can do to minimize the impact on their side and to be of assistance to the caregivers. We have a keynote speaker. Her name is Liz O'Donnell, and she is the founder of the Working Daughter, which is a huge online community for caregivers. So that's on the website under the events page, and we just encourage businesses to participate. This is a free event.
Yeah, and we'll help you push that out as well. Thanks for
Greg.
bringing that up. That's important. Dina?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I just wanted to kind of clarify, because when we talked about respite, I just wanted to make sure the audience knows that there's options with that, right? Because we kind of gave some examples and we really focused on that happening in the home, but it doesn't have to. So if like you're more comfortable in having, your loved one maybe attend a SADS program, or you're taking a vacation and you need 24/7 care and you'd like to place your loved one temporarily in assisted living or nursing home, depending on the care needs, that is something else that's part of a respite that could be made available to you. So I just wanted to kind of point that out as a clarification.
All right, so I'm going to come back to you because you used
Okay.
another acronym that nobody knows. So
Okay.
we do. What is SADS?
Oh, Social Adult Day. I'm sorry. I thought I said Social Adult Day. Yeah. So Social Adult Day programs where, they can go and have engage in some activities and then, still come home in the evening. But, not everybody wants someone coming into the home, or maybe that's not the best setup. So there are options with out of home respite that I just wanted to make sure people knew were also available.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because another community outlet, we have 834 of them across the state, is a congregate site, a senior center. I used to, funny story, I had a board member years ago who was 96 years old and, wanted to engage more with others. And I had said, have you gone to your local senior center? And the response back was, why would I go there? That's where the old people go. And I said, you might want to take a look at it, because what was developed in the 70s and 80s may not be what you think it is today. Not only to be able to, meet other people and have friendship, but all the different programs that are fun, that, help you improve exercise, strength, but just fun stuff too. And so that is absolutely a caregiver support and a respite location as well. So I appreciate that you raising that. Sharon?
Yeah, I think there are so many resources out there to help caregivers. And Gina, you talked about New York Connects, and a caregiver can call 7 different agencies and get varied responses. But if you call New York Connects, you've got a point person who really kind of sees your whole life, all of your needs, all of your concerns. So reach out for help, and don't wait until you're at that crisis. Don't wait until it's a hospital discharge, but really find out what's out there now. Join a caregiver support group, take a class. We offer powerful tools for caregivers, but really don't wait, because it's inevitable in most cases that the journey is going to get more difficult and your needs are going to become greater. So,
and I appreciate all three of your remarks, because I think that the network that we all work in is very different from others. We're not selling a product. We're not selling a service. We're selling objectivity, information, so that you can make the best choices. We don't force services on you. We couldn't, nor would we. And so again, whether this is something that you're thinking about reaching out now just to get some information, do it before it becomes a crisis. If you need it in the future, make a call in the future. Just see what's available that could be of assistance, like the question that we got earlier on. Or if you know somebody in your family or in your circle, provide that as well. There are resources out there to help people when they need them, and not everybody needs them or now, but at some point you might. And again, New York Connects is the first place to go. So Dina, Sharon, Doris, it is such a pleasure to have the three of you on. It's such an important issue. This won't be the last time this year we address this topic in one way or another. A ton of great resources. I want to thank again Kelly Matija for always doing an outstanding job in the production. And we'll be back in about 2 weeks to hit another really important topic that I'm interested in, that is combating ageism. And we're going to have somebody special from Kansas State University to talk about ageism in film. We have been raised in this country to believe that this population, the older population, is not valuable, takes more than it gives, and doesn't matter. None of the data backs that up. And we're gonna go through some of the messaging that is taught right from our kids all the way up in a young, focused society, to continue to provide facts and data on how important older adults are to their families, the economy, their mentoring, their volunteerism, their entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth. So thanks so much for joining us. Please utilize those resources. I want to thank my three guests, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.